Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Thanks for listening to the show. Join your hosts, Bill Alvstad and Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football.
Hey, hi, Seahawks fans. Welcome back to another episode of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers, here to talk Seahawks football. We're going to talk position groups again in this show. We are moving on to the wide receiver position. It'll be a fun show, lots of talent, new offensive scheme, new offensive coordinator. It's going to be kind of crazy, really. Welcome in. Lots to talk about.
Lots to talk about. Unlike the last couple shows where everything was pretty much decided and there's not a lot of names, this is one where there's a lot of names and very much a lot of areas that are undecided at the back end of the roster. Let's just jump in because...
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's talk about scheme first. Let's talk about Geno Smith in this new offense with Ryan Grubb and what they're going to try to do. Really, I mean, it's kind of a spread style offense, air raid offense, if you will, at University of Washington. I don't know if he brings all those concepts with him. Not all of them probably, but a real nice portion of those, like 80%, I think will probably translate into the NFL. Multiple wide receiver sets. They want to spread the field horizontally. They want to take their shots. You've kind of heard that before from Pete Carroll's offense, but that's kind of what you do in the NFL, and then balance that with a decent running game. How do you think the offense is going to look different this year? We've got the same top three wide receivers in DK Metcalf, Jackson Smith, and Njigba, Tyler Lockett. How do they? Is it going to be better for them potentially, or is this going to be kind of a wait and see approach?
Oh, I think it's going to be better for them. If you look at what Ryan Grubb has done in the past, he did a better job of spacing than Shane Waldron did in terms of getting forcing the opposing defense to cover the entire field. And that, I believe, is going to open things up, especially for DK Metcalf, where you're not going to be able to just park a safety on him at all times, because that's just going to pull that safety out of position, and you're going to see Lockett or JSN or one of the other guys be able to exploit that. So I think it's going to be better for everybody.
Yeah, interesting. You know, I do think it's interesting because everyone expects, or at least thinks about, this offensive scheme and the new coach and new offensive coordinator, new defensive coordinator, everything just kind of working and being ready to go out of the gate. And I'm a little bit more reserved than that. I think that, you know, being that it is a new coach with a new offensive coordinator, you've got a lot of the same personnel back, but it's all new terminology, all new schematic thinking for these guys. You've got to get Geno Smith on the right page, number one, and then you've got to have all your wide receivers in sync right from the beginning. And I think there's a lot to learn. I don't know, you know, how simplified the approach will be early on to kind of integrate everyone in and then add things every week. I would imagine that would be it. But a lot of times, sometimes these guys want to put everything in the playbook, into the game plan right away, and sometimes it just doesn't work. So I'm a little bit more skeptical, but optimistic, I guess. What do you think about DK Metcalf's usage in his first 4 years in the league, and compared to some of the other teams out there that feature their number one wide receiver and really kind of scheme those players open and so forth? It doesn't seem like DK has been used that way yet.
He hasn't been used that way, and I think that's one of those things you're going to see more of this year under Grubb, just kind of the way they used Odunze at University of Washington last year. At the same time, like, they didn't force it to him, but his production was still extraordinary. And I mean, this last year wasn't as good,
but a down year overall for everyone.
Yeah, but the entire offense was down. It wasn't that. It wasn't on him. That was on Geno and the offensive line and the running game.
Had over 1,100 yards.
He's one.
His
He's one of the top
per
receivers.
Catches went way up from the year prior, from 11.6 to 16.9 overall. So,
yeah. So I think it's one of those things where we can look at that. And I think you're going to see more creativity in the way he's being used, and that kind of thing. I don't really think you have to force him the ball. I think he's going to get his touches. You want to make sure he doesn't get to a point where he's like super frustrated and all that. But at the same time, like if JSN and Tyler Lockett are doing their thing, that means that Metcalf's gonna get some single coverage that he wouldn't normally get, and that's gonna generate production for him. So I think you can take your time, and he'll get his, but I don't think you need to force the ball to him.
Yeah, I see still, major double coverage for him on most plays, just because.
He's just
would
too
you
good.
rather have DK Metcalf beat you, or would you rather have Tyler Lockett or Njigba beat you? I think Tyler Lockett really has a chance to rebound this year. I mean, Tyler Lockett had kind of a down year. He's kind of been trending down a little bit the last couple of years. Well, over 1,000 yards in 2022, but 894 in 2023, 79 receptions, still led the team in receptions, but his average yards per reception, has continued to kind of go down the last few years, and touchdown production and so forth. So, and again, the whole offense was kind of out of sync last year, and that included the wide receiver room. Nothing wrong with the players. I just think the scheme was, the whole thing was broken, both offense and defense. But Jackson Smith and Njigba, I want to talk about him, and we can come back to Tyler Lockett. But Njigba really, to me, just kind of leapfrogged Lockett this year, towards the end of the year, and then in the offseason, Tyler Lockett took a little pay cut to stay with the team, and there seems to be a little transition there going on between Tyler Lockett and Njigba, between number 2 and number 3 wide receiver on the team.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that that's definitely one of those things that the team's doing, and they're, going to let it play out. But Lockett's getting older. He's lost a step. He, for the first time in his entire career, he had a harder time catching the ball this last year at the end. And JSN is, young, really young, and super talented. So yeah, they're going to make that transition over time. Some weeks it may be obvious, and other weeks it's going to be, no, it's probably still Tyler Lockett's gig. And I think they're completely fine with that. Especially since you know who the number 1 is. Let's
talk skill set just for a second. So between Tyler Lockett and Jackson Smith and Njigba. Now, Njigba had 63 receptions, 628 yards, averaged 10 yards per reception. His long was only 35 yards, 4 touchdowns. Tyler Lockett still had that big time production, 79 receptions, almost 900 yards, 11.5 yards per carry, per reception, 5 touchdowns. They're somewhat equal, but I want to talk to you about skill set in between those two players. Things that Tyler Lockett does really well, and Jackson Smith and Njigba still hasn't yet shown.
Tyler Lockett does everything well. That's why he's been a top 20 wide receiver his entire career. And I think that gets understated because he's on the same team as Metcalf, and he was on a team with Pete Carroll that wanted to run the ball on every play, and that kind of stuff. But Lockett can do anything, or at least he could. I think he's lost a step, but he's a guy that is a great deep ball player. Catches the ball through contact really well. And before the last 6 games of this last year, I would say as well as anyone in the league at being able to catch the ball despite, contact and that kind of stuff. And he's really quick. His short area quickness is elite as well. So I just think that he did a lot of everything well.
And a skilled route runner, really.
Yes. JSN doesn't have quite the long speed. He's taller, he's bigger. but he's not as adept at catching through contact, at least not yet. But he's also a really good route runner. Like I said, he doesn't have the long speed, but he's really good in the short area stuff. He's more of a guy that's going to win in the intermediate routes. And, get the job done that way. They're different players. They really are, but they're also, you can work around either skill set. They're both really good players.
So in previous episodes, kind of a roster evaluation after the season, before free agency and so forth, we talked about DK Metcalf really being the only guy on the roster that can really stretch the field. Now, Tyler Lockett still can. You mentioned he's lost his little step. He's also only 5'10". There really isn't another player on the roster unless you can come up with one that really kind of has that skill set. We can talk about the different players, as we go down. You can talk about Jake Bobo. He doesn't have the speed to do that. Derek Young's a physical kind of compact player, doesn't have that 4.3 speed at all. Dwayne Eskridge is a guy that could potentially have the speed, but doesn't have the skill set to really do that, and has been injured all the time. Jake Laviska Chenault is the new wide receiver that we brought in. He doesn't have that blazing speed, but he is elusive and a bigger body. So I'm not seeing it, Keith. How do we stretch the field with Ryan Grubb's offense?
I think they're going to work on being able to do that with the guys they've got. You got Young who can do it. Derek Young who, he's compact at 6'2", 224, but he does have some long speed. He can do it if he ends up making the squad. I think they'll use size to stretch the field more than just speed, because if you got Jake Bobo and his height down the field, he's not going to get the separation, that another guy will, but he's so tall and he's so good in the air that you can just throw the ball up and let him go get it. So teams have to respect that. And there's other ways to do it. I mean, Tyler Lockett's never been an ideal deep threat at 5'10", but he's been good at it. And sometimes it's just about, can you get a little bit of separation right at the end of the route when the ball arrives, and can you make a catch through contact? And if they can, get JSN to do that, or Tyler Lockett is still up to that task, or one of the new guys, I think they'll be fine. I would prefer if they'd gone out and gotten another guy with, some 4.3 speed to take the top off of defense and allow Metcalf to run a more complex route tree and not have to go deep on every play, which is kind of what they did with him last year, which was frustrating. But if it ends up not happening, then okay, I think they'll be fine. They just kick that can down the road for another year and worry about it in this next off season.
Yeah, I'm kind of hopeful for Chenault actually being able to show up and kind of take over that number 4 spot. Jake Bobo's a fine player. We all like him just from, likability standpoint and so forth. And he's a baller. He's a guy that just goes in and makes catches regardless of speed, whatever. Derek Young, we just haven't seen enough of him. Eskridge, same. Chenault's got some, in his background, he's got some decent stats, some ability to also add value in the return game.
And that's really why they signed him.
Yeah, I think that they signed him too for the potential upgrade, in the wide receiver room too. I think that he adds value there too, and I think he's kind of being overlooked just a little bit there. And then, really the fourth option, if we're being honest, is either going to be Noah Fant or it's going to be Ken Walker out of the backfield. But I do like the youth in this room. I mean, beyond Jake Bobo and Young, you've got Cody White, Aesop Winston. They picked up a kid, an undrafted guy, Hayden Hatton. That looks pretty cool too. So I don't think that we're any worse than last year. And in fact, if Chenault comes in and really adds value, and surprises with like 30 catches, something like that, 35 catches, and really kind of adds to the depth of the room. I think that maybe we even got slightly better, but with the new offensive coordinator, trying to figure that out. And I'm not sure. I really am not sure where we're going to stand with this.
Well, let's go back to that because you really didn't like Shane Waldron at the end. You thought he was a lot of the problem. He was really
creative early on, ran some great route trees, got, his looks out of the wide receiver sets. He could run multiple different options out of those things. And I thought that early he did well. And then I'm not sure why it all kind of fell apart, and it devolved over time. And I don't know why.
If he was part of the problem, even if Ryan Grubb isn't great, isn't the likelihood is that it's going to be an upgrade, not a downgrade, and therefore, I'm trying to figure out where the apprehension is coming from.
Well, it's just that, he's never coached in the NFL. He's I would say, unfamiliar with defenses across the NFL, and he's going to have to be a real quick study to make sure that he figures out mismatches and inherent advantages that he can take care of week in, week out. I'm sure he's trying to do that homework, really. But until you've done it, it's not as easy as it is in college, Keith. It's just everyone's faster, stronger, bigger, longer. And I think that's a real thing, and you have to adjust to that. And I'm out of the gate, I'm not sure. I mean, he could hit a home run, really. And a lot really depends on Geno Smith and his ability to grasp all the concepts and the plays and translate that to the players. But I'm just a little bit more reserved, just because I've seen this movie before. You have too. New coaches in the NFL. We all think and want to believe that the new coaches for the Seahawks, just because it's the Seahawks, it just feels like it should be successful. It feels like there's nothing in the way of these guys calling great games and being top 10 offense. I mean, they're personnel wise, it looks like maybe on paper they've got that opportunity, depending on how the offensive line performs. But in reality, it's going to be hard to crack the top 20, top 15 with especially in the first half of the season, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it might. We'll see. I guess I just have, which is weird because you're usually the optimist. I just have more optimism about Ryan Grubb, and I know that.
Why?
Because of how he was viewed by NFL coaches for the offense that he ran in college. Like, he was known as an innovator. He was known as a guy that got the most out of the talent that he had, that put his guys in positions to be successful. And I don't know if that's, if the Seahawks, I wouldn't have used those terms to describe Shane Waldron.
Well, here's the deal too. Alabama hired DeBoer and Grubb, but I'm pretty darn sure they hired them because of the stellar offensive performance that Washington had. Really,
yeah. And
so I agree with you that he's looked at as a guy that's a total up and coming, one of the best offensive minds in college football. Just needs to translate to the NFL, and I think we've seen the air raid offenses before. And I know that he runs kind of a little hybrid off of that. And I'm just very curious as to see how it really works out. And I think we're going to need a year. I think that it's going to take a little bit of time. This thing is just, they're not going to be a Super Bowl contender right out of the gate. I think we both know that.
Yeah. We don't expect them to be.
Can they be a top 10 offense? They've been close. The expectation was with Shane Waldron that we were real close to that, or should have been a top 10 offense with the skilled players that we did have, and it just didn't happen. I think the offensive line broke down and that kind of changed things. But so we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, we will see. And it's one of those, situations where I just, we don't know. I mean, really, to me, the biggest question mark out of this whole offense is Geno Smith. Because is he going to be the guy that we had, a couple of seasons ago for the first, 10 games or so, or is he going to be the guy that we've had since? Because if he's been going to continue to be the guy that we've had since, then yeah, this offense isn't going to do much. And this is a team that might be in position to draft a quarterback.
It's
quite
hard
honestly,
for me to imagine that the offense itself changed so much between Waldron and Geno Smith over the course of a couple seasons, 2.5 seasons, really. Sorry for my mic. That I just can't, I'm having a hard time trying to understand where it all broke down, because it should have been successful. And I think it just really was the offensive line. I think just that breakdown there really made it difficult for Geno, and, everything got rushed and discombobulated. So,
I mean, definitely a possibility. It's like one of the two of them or both of them couldn't adjust to the fact that the blocking wasn't as good.
Yeah, no doubt. So who are you most interested in seeing this year?
I think I'm most interested in seeing JSN. He started out really slow. There were a couple of guys that were drafted right behind him that had better rookie years, that got off to much faster starts. But down the stretch, JSN was really productive. And I want to see where he's at, the beginning of this year. Is he going to come out and just take over and be the talent that we thought he was going to be?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, he holds the school record at Ohio State for the most catches and receiving yards in a single season in 2021. Just exploded onto the scene, then was injured before he was drafted. And then he came into the year and kind of started slow and then really came on. And if he can continue that momentum into the regular season this year, he's going to be something, really. I think he had 60 some odd receptions last year. I would expect that to jump up into the 80s this year and really kind of be that solid receiver for Seattle, a possession type receiver guy that moves the change. So I'm excited about him too, really. And Tyler Lockett, to be honest with you, it's like Tyler was pinned as a guy that's kind of lost a step. You've said it yourself. He's the guy. But if you really look at his stats and you combine that with everyone else that kind of diminished a little bit, the entire tight end room, was down.
The entire offense was down.
The entire offense. And so if you it's kind of lockstep with that, if you will. And so I'm not sure if Tyler Lockett's really ready to kind of step down from the number 2 wide receiver overall. I think that he could probably challenge Jackson Smith and Jigba for that,
Oh, absolutely. I think he can. I agree. I'm not ready to write him off. I think he has lost a step, but that doesn't mean much. I mean, he is so good in the short area quickness, and he's such a good route runner, and he does all these other things really well. I guess the thing that was the big, the thing that concerned me most as we went down, got down the stretch and all of that, it was the drops, because he's never been a guy that drops the ball. And then suddenly for like 6 weeks, he dropped a lot of balls. And that has me worried that maybe there was something else going on, but maybe it was just a hand injury or something that we didn't know about.
Well, he had that concussion, not a concussion, but man, he got hit hard that one play last year and went into the blue tent and came back the same game or whatnot. But man, he pretty much strives to eliminate those kind of plays from his life. I mean, he dives down away from contact and gets out of bounds, and kind of self-preservation for Tyler Lockett early in his career had an issue with concussion and, of course, a knee and hamstring, I think, early in his career. And since then, he's been really healthy. And last year, he kind of got banged up a little bit. And I think that was part of it. So
Actually, when the injury that took him out for, wasn't it a broken leg? That was like a compound fracture and like his shoe filled up with blood and all of that.
Oh gosh, I don't know.
It happened on a touchdown.
I don't know. I can't remember, honest. Maybe you block things like that out. If so, I'm guilty as charged because I don't remember that. I do remember a few injuries though, for sure. Like he may have broken a leg, like returning or something.
No, I remember it as they threw the ball, he caught a touchdown, people ran down to like celebrate, and he's just laying on the ground. Oh. And then the cart came out.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, you know what? There's a good chance my brain just decided to make that memory up. So let's just not roll with that.
So are you expecting anything this year from Jake Bobo?
I actually am. I think he'll be improved. I don't see any reason why not to be. He showed last year that his route tree was larger than you'd think for a guy who's really tall and supposedly doesn't have any speed. He played significantly faster than his reported 40 time. Like that's clearly not a thing. That's clearly been mismeasured, whether it was because he was hurt at the time or what, but he's a better runner than a 4.99 40.
Yes.
He's faster than
been reported. He's closer to a 4.7, 4.69 or something like that.
Yeah. But even that, I thought he played better then, but a lot of what he did was he did a lot of dirty work. He blocked downfield for other receivers or came in and blocked a linebacker to try and spring a running back around the outside. And he was just willing to do a lot of that kind of stuff. And coaches love that. They love that about, they love having guys like that. And that's going to keep him on the field, and him being on the field is going to give him opportunities to make catches. So, and I think that if there's a possibility that he could take a step forward and be a better player. I think we're not asking him to catch, 50 passes, but if he catches 36, 38, we'll call that a good year. And
totally.
We'd love that.
Yeah. And all he really needs to do is sit down, in a soft spot in a defense and just wait for the ball. I mean, he's going to get single coverage. Most of that coverage is going to peel away from him if it even looks like it's going to go to somebody else. And so often he's going to be left alone, with an opportunity. So we'll see. I like Jay Bobo. I think he's a fun player to watch because he's worked so hard, and you root for a guy too, undrafted rookie free agent that makes a team. Doug Baldwin was the last wide receiver to do that on this team. So
Jermaine Kearse.
Oh yeah.
Jermaine Kearse was an undrafted, player.
Yeah. Wow.
And, the Seahawks have kind of that tradition of undrafted wide receivers that can step up and play big roles. I mean, Doug Baldwin was, maybe not right away.
Guys ever.
Yeah. I mean, there was a point in his career where he was an elite slot receiver, just absolutely elite. And watching him get off the line of scrimmage, especially when the opposing teams had someone up in press coverage, was the best part of watching Seahawk tape. He was so good at that. I think draft position does not always mean much. We've seen a lot of first round, second round busts in the NFL in the last decade. And yet we've got guys like Baldwin who are undrafted players that were very, very good. So it's one of those positions that the NFL just doesn't get right all that often, which is weird, in my opinion, that it's a position of struggle.
So one last question. So I want to talk about de-escalates just for a second. With the new return rules and so forth, I think it does open up an opportunity for him to, if healthy, obviously, asterisk, be a part of this team in a positive way. that would give him an opportunity to really show his skill set, and then somehow or another work his way back into the wide receiver room. Now he is starting out with new coaches, new scheme, and hopefully just that change alone really kind of lifts him up a little bit. But
would be nice.
He does have an interesting skill set that would lend itself to a nice return game if he can do it. I just, he probably doesn't have the body type to absorb contact, and I don't even know if it's just that, but he's prone to injuries that keep him off the field, and he doesn't. I'm not sure about the mental toughness. There's a lot of mental toughness that goes in with being available on for games and practices and so forth. And I just want to see if maybe he's turned the page a little bit. So that's another name that I'm just really curious about this year. That's got kind of a fresh opportunity, really.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy that kind of needs a fresh opportunity, because you try and depend on a guy and he's never available, and it's just one thing after another, and he plays very little over his entire career and all of that. I think he was going to get a chance to come back and earn a spot because his contract was so cheap, but the team was not depending on him. They were ready to move on. Okay, now you get new coaches, and you're like, hey, look, this guy that has a skill set. Let's see what happens. And so I think it's going to help him. Now, to do that, he's got to take advantage of that. He's got to stay healthy. He's got to show in camp that he is the guy that they thought they were drafting that year when they
Humphrey.
God, that
right.
That drives me
bites.
so.
It still bites.
I at some point I need to get over that.
Do you know
I really do.
After this season, Creed Humphrey is a free agent.
Do you think he's not going to get re-signed?
Just kidding. Who knows, right? But that would be the next opportunity for Seattle to correct that mistake and get.
Yeah, if for some reason the Rams can't afford him, and the Seahawks,
it's not the Rams. It's the Kansas City Chiefs.
That's right, the Chiefs. If the Chiefs can't afford him, and the Seahawks are able to sign him away and have their Pro Bowl center, I'd say at that point I would the choice to draft D. Eskridge will hurt less.
All right, let's end on that note. Will hurt less. It's a good room. It's a fun room. I don't want to be too pessimistic about it. I'm optimistic and hopeful that it's going to be at least what it was last year, and with improved offensive line play, this could be an explosive offense. I mean, it really could. I mean, you've got some great running backs, great wide receivers, a new offensive scheme that nobody has figured out yet. So if they can kind of come out of the gate and just really nail it, it could be something to behold. But I'm reserving my judgment until at least through training camp, and I'll reevaluate. So,
yeah.
All right. Let's get out of here. Find Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. You can find me at NW Seahawk. The show is Seahawks Playbook Podcast. We are on all the platforms as well as our YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button, share it, like it, and leave us a comment. And we'll talk soon. And next up, I think, is the tight end room. So,
yep.
Yeah. Until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.